An earthquake felt earlier this week in Israel, rumblings off our coast, and something shaking in the north and the east of us. This is the news of Israel today and around us in the Middle East. That's right, my name is Segal, and this is VFI News. And I'm here to give you insights and my commentary on what's happening in and around us, because things are shaking continually all the time. Good news, not so good news, and some bad news. You know, somebody once said, life is like a camera. Focus on what's important, capture the good times, develop from the negatives, and if things don't work out, take another shot. Now, I'm going to take a shot at all of you today, and if that doesn't work out, I'll bring my assistant, Gingy, into focus with me, in case he needs to remind me of what's missing in the news. But let's start with this earthquake, because a 5.8 earthquake was shaking off the coast of Rhodes, which is, you know, in the region of Greece. All of you take out a map, learn a little bit of geography here. And it was felt all the way 500 to 600 kilometers east of it in Haifa, the northern city of Israel, as well as friends of mine felt it all the way to Jerusalem. I didn't feel a thing because I was probably driving a little bit like a typical Israeli at the time. But in Egypt, they reported it at 6.4 on the Richter scale, and that's beginning to get quite big, and that's what I would say shake, rattle, and roll. So what really is happening around us? And I'd like to look at what specifically happened in Lebanon recently, which could have overtones and dribble down all the way into Israel. Because our own Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, said something that was very profound, and he said that what's happening in Lebanon and in Iraq these days is a result of, quote, the Iranian touch. Quote, every place the Iranians go enters a tailspin of violence, poverty, failure, and instability. We've seen this happen not only in Iran to its own populace, but in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, and down in Yemen, and of course the Gaza Strip, because the Gaza Strip is governed and controlled by Hamas, which is a proxy military group of terrorists that are supported by Iran. And then we look at what's happening in Beirut with the central positioning of Hezbollah, which has infiltrated the government. And so there was an outbreak in violence this week in Beirut because a judge who was appointed by the new government, which is several governments now newly appointed in the last few years, is investigating who was behind the Beirut bomb blast with over 2,500 tons of ammonium nitrate, which is used for weaponry, rockets, for terrorist explosions, and all sorts of bombs. It's suspected that Hezbollah is actually behind that ammonium nitrate. We don't know the facts yet. We'll wait until the inquiry comes out. But Hezbollah began protesting and began shooting in Beirut into the Christian neighborhoods, and they want to overthrow this judge's inquiry because I believe the trail is leading closer to Hezbollah's influence in Beirut. The big question, and this could have overtones for Israel, is will Lebanon fall to another civil war which will tear apart the country, which would be awful again? You know, people, about 70% of Lebanon's population is suffering from a lack of life's basic necessities and a lack of food. There are water shortages, there's electricity blackouts nearly all the time, there's not enough fuel, it's terrible. And this is the Iranian influence that I'm talking about. We look at what's happening in the Gaza Strip. In May of this year, of course, Hezbollah stayed quiet, but Hamas and Islamic Jihad, who are both financially supported with weaponry and finances down in the Gaza Strip, shot over 4,300 rockets towards Israel. About 10% of them fell back on their own population. Where's the world outcry that we're looking for in that? It's terrible. It's really sad. And we need to pray especially for the Lebanese Christians who are suffering Just unbelievable these days. That's why a lot of the Lebanese Christians are leaving the country of Lebanon. Many of the professional nurses and doctors who are Christians, not only, but especially, are leaving and going to Western countries and to Europe where they have relatives, because it's just a difficult situation. So all roads lead to Jerusalem. Speaking of the earthquake from Rhodes. But on the other hand, we have to look to the east of us, because we've heard these rumors about Gog and Magog and a future war with what was called in biblical times Persia, but is today the region called Iran. That's right, something is cooking in Iran, and it's not good. It's called nuclear weaponry. Yes, focus on it, brothers and sisters. I know that you have other problems in your countries, but this is something we cannot afford to take our eyes off of. We cannot afford to take our eyes off of. Put your glasses on and see what's happening in the Middle East, because the IAEA, does anybody know what that is out there? Yes, it's the United Nations Atomic Watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, confirmed on Tuesday that Iran has established a process to accelerate production of highly enriched uranium. This is dangerous, people, and we need to understand that Iran is on a drive to obtain nuclear weapons in order to blackmail Israel, the United States, and Western civilization as we know it today. We cannot allow them to get nuclear weapons. This was an agreement that originally was negotiated with Iran by President Obama, former President Obama, and yes, Joe Biden and John Kerry. But I'm telling you, Donald Trump had it right when he kept the sanctions up and the pressure on Iran, in my opinion, to force them to retreat from their nuclear weapons program, because now their weapons grade uranium has been enriched to over 60%, and when they get to 90%, we're all in trouble, because they will have enough uranium-enriched weapons quality uranium to build the first bomb. And this could happen by the end of 2021 unless the world steps in and takes action, military action, and Israel takes action. Why all the quiet in the Middle East? Because we may be now the calm before the storm. In fact, when I look at my clock, I can tell you we are 1 minute to midnight on this nuclear weapons program. So what will happen? We're going to have to look at every week. Now, Israel is not quite ready to attack Iran, but plans are being drawn up by the United States, by European nations, by Israel for the alternative, because Tehran is stalling to go back to Vienna and negotiate further concerning their weapons program. That tells me that when they're stalling, they're getting closer and closer. And today's president of Iran, who was appointed in August of this year, his name is Ibrahim Raisi. He is known as the butcher of Iran, the hangman of Iran, and was responsible for thousands and thousands of Iranians who were hung in the streets throughout Iran, who protested against the Ayatollah and its regime. So as we've felt this quake in Israel from the Mediterranean Sea, and we look to the north of us, the east of us, the south of us, the west of us, this is what Israel is in the news. It's the center of the news that's happening, and we can look at the entire Middle East together. That's why I want you to subscribe at the social media site you're watching me on, and send me your comments, send me your questions. Make it nice though, and so we can explore this together and understand and learn together more about what's happening in Israel and the Middle East. That's what VFI News is all about. That's why I am coming to you in a very casual way, so you can sit back and relax and we can look together. My hat's off to all of you. Barry Segal.